Good evening, bookies. My name is Hannah, and today we are back with Top 10 Tuesdays. So today we are talking about the top 10 books that I read as a child or that were kind of important to my childhood. As far as I know, only one of them is kind of more in like my younger teen years, while most of these are when I was in like 5th grade, 6th grade, probably up to 7th grade is when I would count them as children books, and then from then on I kind of count them as teen books. So today we are talking about my top 10 favorite ones that kind of made my childhood. So let's begin. So the first book series I have on this list is the Spiderwick series by Tony, Tizzarelli, and Holly Black. This is just a small, very small 5-book series, the original 5-book series. And I remember first seeing these books, and my mom bought me the whole box set because I read them at school, and then like she bought them for me because I just loved them so much. And then when I found out there was a movie coming out, she got me the movie, and like I feel like they were a very big part of my childhood. They're kind of like, I don't know if anybody else has read them, but they're just kind of like they're kind of a little fantasy series, kind of like Fablehaven, but like more fairies, more things the parents couldn't see. It's a really interesting series, and it was definitely very important in my childhood. Speaking of Fablehaven, Fablehaven comes in at number 2. I do have Dragon Watch by Brandon Mole, but I haven't read it yet. But his original Fablehaven series was my favorite books for so long. And I remember a long time ago, one of my friends told me that he was, Brandon Mole was petitioning for it to become a movie, and that they were doing like auditions for Kendra and Seth, and I was like, a movie? A Fablehaven movie? And now that it's been probably 10 plus years later, I'm kind of like, where the hell is my Fablehaven movie? I mean, I feel like this series deserves its own movie. If Spiderwick got a movie, then surely Fablehaven gets its own movie. As of now, I don't know anything about a Fablehaven movie, but I could look it up and check real quick. So yeah, as far as I know, there is not a Fablehaven movie coming or in the works or even talked about, which is sad because I feel like this series deserves a movie. Alright, next we have Of Mice and Magic series. I think it's by David Farland, I think. Hopefully that's right. This book was also a very important part of my childhood, just because like, the couple books that I've already told you about are like already fantasy, they already got magic in them. But like for some reason I feel like Of Mice and Magic was the book that I remember reading the earliest. And honestly, it was a really good book, and honestly, to welcome me into the magic genre, it did awesome. It was a great first starter book. Next, we have another Brandon Mole book, and how this is important to me is when I first bought my bookshelf, this bookshelf over here is my first ever bookshelf. Coming along with it was my first ever book that I ever got like wrapped for Christmas, and that is The Candy Shop War, of course, by Brandon Mole. And I remember opening up the book. Me and Amelia both got the same book for that year, and we both, once my mom put it under the tree, we were both like, oh, this is obviously a book, but what book? And then we opened it and we read it, and it's a really good book. I haven't read the new one yet. I don't think I ever will. But I remember when I opened my bookshelf, Candy Shop War was the first book, and it always stayed up on the top shelf no matter what. But it was like, it has a very important part to me just because it was the first book I ever got for Christmas. Alright, so this book deserves a little bit of a backstory kind of thing. Did anyone ever do AR reading, accelerated reading in like elementary and junior high at all, or was that just like UTONs? If you don't know what AR is, it's where you were technically required to read no matter what. And like, you would read books, and then you would take a test on the computer of that book for a certain amount of points, and then when you got the points, you would like, it'd go to your actual grade. So like, say for example, you pick a tiny 5-point book, you read it, you take a test, You pass it, you get 5 points. And usually teachers will have like a certain amount of AR points you have to get. Usually it was 20. Sometimes like one of my teachers had 40 just because she wanted, like, it was 20 for her, but she wanted to challenge us and see if we get 40. So the first time that I ever remember passing off all 20 of my AR points in one day was when I read The Tale of Despero by Kate DiCamillo. Now, to me as a kid in like 5th or 6th grade, this book was huge. Like, I swear it was probably this big. I don't know how big it is anymore because I never actually owned the book and I can't like look back at it as reference. But I remember this book was freaking massive. And it was worth 15 points. And in 5th grade, that's all I had to get. And like, so I sat down, I worked my way through Tale of Despero, and then I took the test probably the next quarter. So the way it worked is you had to get 15 points each quarter. But I read it one quarter, and I already had my points for that quarter. So the next quarter, I was like, I might not have to read any books. So I took the Tale of Despero test, I passed it, and then boom, I was done for the whole quarter. And so, like, that is, like, the one book that I remember with the reading that was huge, that passed me on my AR reading tests. And, like, for some reason, I, like, whenever someone was like, how many AR tests more do you have to take? And I was like, none, I'm already done. It's, like, the 3rd day of the quarter. For some reason, in that moment, I felt like a hero or, like, an absolute badass because I was already done with my AR reading while everybody else was sitting here reading their itty-bitty tenure books. No, guys, go big or go home. Alright, so the next series is literally the series that got me into reading, period. Not like fantasy, it's literally like the first books I ever read was this series. And this series will always be on my list of my favorite books ever. And that is the Nancy Drew series by Caroline Keene. I read so many of these books. Like, I would take 3 a day. I'd read 1 a day. I would read a book a day, which isn't that impressive now that I think about it, because they're only like 180 pages, I think. But I would read 1 a day, go back to the library the next day, and exchange it out. And I'd kind of just sort through them all. And I had to have read at least 20 or 30 of those books, because, like, I was in love with them. My mom bought me a Nancy Drew purse. She bought me a couple of Nancy Drew copies. My grandma found some for me. I was in love with this series, and like, this was the series that got me originally into reading. So the next book on my list is one that I've kind of talked about a few times on this channel, just because it was the first book that I've ever read that scared the shit out of me. And even now, as I think about it today, I probably wouldn't find it that scary if I reread it. But like, as a little tiny 7th grader Hannah, this book was terrifying to me. That is Coraline by Neil Gaiman. And if you've seen the movie itself is just scary. And as far as I remember, the movie kind of goes along with the book pretty okay. Wiley does not exist in the book, by the way. That's kind of something I noticed. I actually can't remember much about the book at all, really, except for the basement scene. But in the movie, when Coraline is looking for the 3 things, the 3 little, what is it, clues, treasures, eyes, the children's eyes or whatever, she finds her dad in the garden, and he's kind of like trying to help her out, and he's kind of getting forced up against his will to do whatever Beldan wants. In the book, it's a little different, and it's a little more terrifying. Coraline goes down into their basement. I don't know if she was looking for the eyes or not in the book, but she goes down into their basement, and he is down there, but he's had all his features removed, so it's kind of just a body. And, like, instead of helping her out, I think he actually attacks her. I'm really not quite sure, but all I remember is Coraline terrified me. Okay, so for the next one, it actually does have a movie, and the movie is quite different from the books also. So with these ones, I actually watched the movies before I read the books because I didn't even know it was a book series. And I kind of like to consider them 2 separate things under the same premise, under the same name. Just kind of like that. So it is The Princess Diaries by Meg Cabot. The books are a lot different than the 2 movies. For one, like, I don't think in the book she ever goes to Genovia. Again, I read these as a kid, guys. I don't really remember a lot about these books. All I remember is, like, the Princess Diaries series was a pretty, like, good size series for me. And when I first started reading them, I was like, wow, this is actually really cool. One, the grandma in the movie and the grandma in the books is completely different. Completely. The one in the books is not very nice. She's not Julie Andrews. And in the movie, obviously, she's Julie Andrews and she's freaking perfect. Not like that in the books at all. Okay, there's another little backstory for this one. So in elementary school, actually in all my school education period, we had not just AR, but we had required reading. And I have to admit, in like my high school and my junior high, I never did like the most common books that people are doing nowadays, period. Like, I didn't read Catcher in the Rye, I didn't read To Kill a Mockingbird, I didn't read... There's more, hold on. I read like weird, different stories, and I feel like that was kind of weird, because like, yeah, I read Romeo and Juliet, and I read The Crucible, but I think those are the only two that I can remember actually reading that everybody else has read. But this one was a required reading in like 5th grade. And like, not a lot of people actually know about this series, so I'm kind of like, what was my teacher doing? So this series is Kingdom Keepers Disney After Dark series by Ridley Pearson. This is about a ton of kids. I don't remember a lot about this book again, let me just admit. All I remember really is that like the attractions at Disneyland would come alive at night. So would the villains, so would the heroes, and it was a like amazing series, and I probably can partially blame that for like my love of Disney. I probably am gonna pick up these books if I can ever find them and read them again, because these books were awesome. And last but not least, this is kind of the one, I think I spoke about it earlier in the video, where it's like it's not quite a kid book, it's more of a teen book. And like this author, it's not a series, it's an author, got me into the love of fairy tales and retellings. And this is Alex Flynn. Any of her books. Yeah, I haven't read a few of them, but I've read, I want to say most of them. The first book I ever read of hers was Beastly, and I was in love with it. And then I read her A Kiss in Time book, which I bought recently. Like, she writes just little kind of one book series, like little standalone books of retellings, put in a modern day world, and I loved them, and I still do. Alright, that is it for this Top 10 Tuesdays. Thank you so much for joining me. I will see you guys in the next one. Rock on. Hey guys, I'm Hannah at Heckyeahbooks, and today me and my sister, who you are going to meet in just a few seconds, we are doing the siblings tag. So she is sitting behind the camera.